Tonight, thanks for coming out. It's a hot evening. Hopefully you'll get a chance to cool off in here. My name is Karen Schneller McDonald. I'm the chair of the Sauk Hill Watershed Community. And we put together this presentation tonight to, as soon as I get rid of the extraneous stuff here, to, thank you, okay. To give you an overview of our most recent water quality testing project, which we did this spring, and we have just been crunching through the numbers and the results and put some of that together into this report, which I'm going to share with you tonight. First of all, I want to thank the town of Red Hook for funding the lab work for this study. It's expensive, and we couldn't have done it without you. So, Robert, thank you. Anyone else here from the town, thank you. And also, a Bard Community Sciences Lab, in particular, Eli Duker, for support and for major help in getting us through the numbers and dealing with the data.
It was mostly the students.
Yeah.
Thank you, but it was a lot
Yeah.
of the students that helped that.
And many thanks, many thanks to the volunteers who underwent training this spring to go out and sample throughout the watershed. If are any of you here? I'm sure some of you. You want to just stand up if you were a water sampler or volunteer? Yes. Thank you. It was a lot of work, but hopefully rewarding. Well, this is looking a little odd, but this is an overview of the sites that we selected to sample for this project. They're numbered on the map throughout the Sauk Hill watershed, and we added a couple in the Stony Creek watershed as well, because that is also in the town of Red Hook. And it just seemed kind of odd to leave that out. So we also, we added some sites to the regular sites that have been tested for water quality over the last 10 or more years by the Bard Community Sciences Lab. And then to the right there is a key, and the key shows you all of these numbers, a name for each site, and a basic location, so you can figure out where that site is. And all of this information is and will be available to you online, so you can have a look for yourself and ponder what it all means. I'm going to start out by describing this as we have basically done a blood test for the watershed. And just like with a blood test, you go in and you test for a whole bunch of different things to see how your overall health is. The thing is, conditions change over time. You don't just do one blood test in your lifetime. You have to go back. And if there are things in your environment or that affect you that change your blood and change your chemistry, it's going to show up in your blood test. And it's exactly the same for testing the water in a watershed. To the right is a list of the 100+ parameters that were tested by the lab that received our water quality, our water samples. So, and we'll be talking about some of these in a little more detail as we go. So first we had the volunteers go out, collect the samples, then we sent them out to the lab for analysis, and then we received back a pile of information, of data, and we needed to begin to make sense of it. So we did is organize that information by site and also by the type of contaminant. This is an excerpt right out of the report for Appendix 2 in the report. That just shows you for magnesium, for example, one of those parameters. How did each of the sites read and come out relative to each other for that one particular thing? And they're color-coded because the Red Hook Library Pond is still water, so that's a little bit different. A couple of these streams were tributaries to the Sauk Hill, and then we have the Sauk Hill itself, and then we have Stony Creek. And we thought to maybe separate them out and, so we could see how each of them is doing relative to the others. So what we found and what we didn't find is important. Out of those 100 plus parameters, only 19 showed up in our samples, which is good news. And one of the groups that were not detected was the group that includes volatiles, pesticides, herbicides, PCBs, phthalomethanes, or trihalomethanes. And they come from, disinfectants, paints, all kinds of things. None were detected, but we have to remember with that blood test, they may be present at other times of the year, depending on circumstances. For example, in summer and fall, when herbicide and pesticide applications are highest, and that's when you have the highest chance of them showing up in the water. And also, many of these chemicals bind to soil particles and can settle to the bottom as sediment, and can periodically be stirred up during a heavy rain or high water conditions and re-enter the water that way. So while one test is really, really important, it takes an array of tests to really continue to monitor your system. Yeah?
When you're doing the testing, is it in the water column or in the sediment?
No, the water quality, the water samples that we took for this were strictly in the water. And sediment will come up a little bit more in a couple slides. So it's a good point. For fecal indicating bacteria, well, we found a lot. But, it's a lot of the other Hudson River tributaries also show an increase in these bacteria whenever it rains. So again, conditions change. There were a couple of sites that are continually elevated. That was the Benner Road site with extremely high levels found at the Smith Street tributary site, well above safe limits. And this was tied to the wastewater treatment plant, which I'm not going to get into that as a separate issue, but did have an effect, certainly, on some of these levels. These are two more examples of the graphs that were put together with the data that we got from the lab that show how high some of those fecal indicating bacteria levels were. And especially, again, in the Smith Street tributary, the Benner Road tributary, and for a couple of things, there were a couple of other sites that also were reading kind of high in that.
Could you elaborate a little more on Smith Street, how much higher it was than everyone else and what the safety level is?
Well, it's hard to do that based on one reading.
Okay.
We do have a lot of data for Smith Street over time, and it's been elevated for a long time. I don't know, Eli, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. So I know it's hard to see you all, but were there the physical reports? Did they get passed out?
The what?
The physical reports.
We have a few, but people,
Yeah.
you can
Yeah,
take a
so
look at
maybe
the
folks
physical
can look at it
report.
more in detail, but on the slide on the upper left-hand side, and on the figure on the upper left-hand side there, same is for the one below it, but you'll see there's a line that goes all the way across, and then it's broken, and then there's a red thing beside it. That is the Smith Street tributary there. That's the one that comes directly from the wastewater treatment plant. This was on April 6th, so things were still evolving and happening with fixing the issue with the waste treatment plant, or attempts to fix it. So at that time, on April 6th, the levels were elevated, I'd say, 2 to 3 times higher than they should have been, which is actually, we had done several samples before that's the same kind of thing. But as Karen is saying, subsequent sampling will show different numbers. And I think based on what we're starting to see as we continue to do the sampling, that the numbers are going down. But what you will also see there is that there are high levels at other areas in the Saukville. It was raining a bit on April 6th, which means that just like every other tributary along the Hudson River, we see high fecal indicating bacteria when it rains, which is about the legacy of sewage pollution that's on these tributaries that gets stirred up whenever it rains. So it's not necessarily, so there are high numbers, and particularly on the main stem of the Sauk Hill, those high numbers are likely not necessarily due to current sewage contamination as much as it is an indication of the legacy of long-term sewage contamination on the waterways.
And there's also the leaking septics, and there are other sources for that as well.
Yeah.
But with these graphs, we have
Good.
produced one of these for each one of the parameters that were measured. So we can go and look at any given site, for example, Linden Avenue Bridge, and we can look through this set of graphs and we can see how that site in particular was doing relative to all the other sites in all of these different parameters. Yeah, Henry?
Like a blood test, there are some indicators that are very low, which can be a danger sign. Are there any of the things that we tested for that we want to be higher than they were? You know what I mean? Is a low number sometimes bad?
Yeah.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Offhand, I can't say. Let me go through the rest of the results, and then at the end, we can pick up on that. That's an interesting point. But
What I
yes.
will say is that the fact that there wasn't anything, that we didn't find anything in that one Albany Post Road, to me that was a failed test, because there's always some sort of fecal indicating bacteria in there. So
Yeah.
if we turn up with zero,
So failed testing,
Yeah.
the folks who took the sample maybe didn't do it right?
No. Sometimes it's just like, well, unfortunately, lab work is like baking a cake. Sometimes your cake totally fails.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you can just remove it from that.
Because I did the Albany Road site.
Okay,
I want to know.
Just one note on the Smith Street site. This was back in April. A lot has changed with the plant since then. We'll work with Eli to put together some of the kind of continuous data since then and share that out with the group. Probably do that in the next month or two.
Yeah. That's totally my fault that it happened. Sorry.
Eli.
Okay, let's move on, and we're going to have a lot of time to talk about this when I'm done. Here's some more on that site, but this does illustrate how conditions interrelate between some of these different sites. We have, the site with the wastewater treatment plant, the Smith Street tributary site, which was very high, and then another stream comes up from the south, which is cleaner than the rest of the Benner Road tributary, and dilutes some of that pollution that's coming from the Smith Street tributary before it reaches the actual Benner Road tributary, then flowing on to 199 and then on to the Sauk Hill. And we're not sure what happens to it in between there. We haven't tested all of those sites yet, but hopefully we will sometime. Okay, so another thing that we found with regard to chemicals, nutrients, and salt, this is especially important because it is related to road salt and also harmful algal blooms, which are two things that we really want to watch out for in our area, especially during the course of the summer for algal blooms. But anyway, these substances come from fertilizer nutrients. And road salt, not just from roads, but also from home use, agricultural application, and sewage from older failing septic systems, and also sediment, as we talked about before, carried by stormwater runoff. So there are a lot of things coming together. And when we measure each one of these parameters, we have down here magnesium, potassium, manganese, and sodium. Putting all of those together along with chloride and seeing how a site measures up in all of that gives a really good indicator of the presence of salt in the water. And correct me on that, Eli, if that's, I know it's a big generalization, but.
So if everybody remembers a little bit of chemistry, sodium chloride is NaCl, right? And so you got one chloride and one sodium. And when we looked at the sodium numbers and compared those with the chloride numbers, they are a straight line, which indicates that, chloride can come from a lot of different places. But if it correlates so closely with sodium, that's basically a really strong indicator that the reason why things are in the water is because of the road salt that we apply. It's salt, which again is another thing that most tributaries up and down the Hudson are also dealing with.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because we have to be safe, we have to not die when there's winter storms. But the interesting thing is that it wasn't just sodium, it's also magnesium. So some of us apply magnesium chloride to our walkways for different reasons. We also can apply potassium chloride. So there's different kinds of road salts that we apply. And they're all showing up as very tightly connected with chloride.
What about like the salt that you use to treat softeners?
Absolutely.
Is
That is also.
Is that less harmful or just as
No,
bad?
that's going to show up just as
In
much.
these just as
Yes, absolutely.
Which
Yeah.
is that? Which salt is that?
I don't know what the softeners. It's mostly. I think it might.
Sodium chloride mostly. I think
yeah,
it is.
It is. It's kind of like road salt where you can get all different kinds, and I'm not sure why.
It's supposed to be, you have to drink it, so.
Yeah.
Well,
There's that. The other thing about it is that the manganese itself is actually, there aren't a lot of manganese chlorides that you apply based on your road salt, but they are showing up because once you get road salt out there, it likes to bring the manganese along with it. So it is also indicating that as the road salts migrate through the watershed, it's grabbing manganese and bringing it along.
so things are definitely related, and they're related with regard to the algal blooms as well, where we found some areas maybe to look out for, the library pond, and some areas of the Stony Creek as well as the Sawkill. So that's something we probably want to keep an eye on locally to make sure it doesn't get out of control. Now, we did find some PFAS, and I just want to give a real quick background to PFAS because everybody talks about it. It's all over the place, and I'm not sure if people really understand what's involved. There are many PFAS chemicals, over 12,000. They come from a lot of different places, more places than you can imagine. I have really long lists, some of which are in the report that we did. Everything that's up there from nonstick cookware, Scotchgard, firefighting foam, water and stain-resistant clothing, even dental floss, ski wax, all, you wouldn't believe how many products contain PFAS. And there are no known safe levels of exposure. We also know they have a lot of negative health effects. And they are called forever chemicals because they don't break down easily in the environment. They stick around for a really, really long time. So they're very hard to get rid of. The samples that we sent to the lab that were tested for PFAS were tested for 25 chemicals listed in that chart. We only tested 5 sites, but I'll get to, yeah, we tested 5 sites. I'll get to that in a minute. I just wanted to show you the extent of PFAS found in drinking water across the country. When you zoom into that map, it's an interactive map put up by the Environmental Working Group. You get the individual dots for individual locations, and as you can see there on that closer in map, between Kingston and Poughkeepsie and the surroundings, which certainly include Red Hook, there are multiple locations that have shown up positive for PFAS in drinking water. We only tested 5 sites for PFAS because it's very expensive to test. And so we had to start somewhere. So we started with 5. 2 of them showed up positive for PFAS, the Library Pond site and the Smith Street site. The others did not show anything. The Lower Falls, which is at the mouth of the Sawkill, and Linden Avenue, and then Oriole Mills, which is a little further to the east. So we did okay, but we found PFAS. And we'll get around to what we can do about that in a couple slides. That's the next thing that we did with the information that we looked at and that we put into graphs is, okay, what do we do about this? What can our community do or start to think about doing that will help us keep our water in good condition? Well, I'll start with PFAS because we just talked about it. We can do more testing to get a better idea of how it's distributed throughout the community. We can consider wastewater treatment plant and drinking water filtration to filter PFAS. There are a number of options that I mentioned in the report. I did not do an exhaustive study of that, but it does seem that emerging technology is certainly trying to address that and come up with even better ways to remove PFAS from water, especially drinking water. And also public education to let people know where this stuff comes from, what products have it. I mean, if you have, clothing that's treated with PFAS clothing to be water resistant, you put it in the laundry. Well, some of that PFAS goes into your wastewater from your laundry. So there are all kinds of other ways that PFAS gets into the environment. What can we do about it, though? That's the section we're on now. So for that first group we talked about, the volatiles, the pesticides, the herbicides, we didn't find any, true. But what we need to do as a follow-up to that is test some of these locations in summer and in fall, and test the sediments of some of those locations as well, so that we can see if some of those substances are binding up to the soil and sinking out into the sediment and kind of cycling through that way, or if they're washing into the water during other times of the year, during different seasons, and showing up in the water that way. And then for chemicals, nutrients, and salt, again, summer and fall sampling to get a better picture of what's going on. Good public education would be really good for both for road salt use and salt use for other de-icing in the winter, and also for maintaining septic systems, and along that financial support for homeowners to upgrade or maintain their septic systems too, because leaky septic systems, septic systems are all over the county, all over the township, and they're not all in good repair, and they're not all being maintained properly. So that's something, not real glamorous, but it's something that really could make a big difference to our water if we beefed up those programs. Also, we're looking at good management of the wastewater treatment plant and exploring some alternative wastewater treatments to better control rain-induced untreated sewage, which is also a problem in many communities in this area, and to better process nitrogen and phosphorus, those precursors to algal blooms. So those are some of the things that we can do in a nutshell. I'm giving you the very stripped down, very nutshell view of this, so we can just zoom through the whole thing. We're still on what to do about it because we haven't covered everything yet. So for the chemicals, nutrients, and salt, oh, did I repeat that one?
Yeah.
I guess I repeated it. Well, I guess it's really important then. There you go. For the fecal indicating bacteria, many of the things that were recommended for some of these other chemicals and substances will also help with the fecal indicating bacteria. But we could consider signage at hotspot sites so that community members are informed of the risk when those levels get really high. So the biggest thing, or one of the biggest things that we can do about all of these issues and potential issues with our water is collect more samples and evaluate more samples, because there is no substitute for collecting that information over time so that we have a baseline and have something to go on when things go wrong. Along with that comes emphasizing the role of community science and the role of volunteers. Without the volunteers in this project, we would have had no project. We would have not been able to conduct the water quality sampling. The volunteers did a great job, but we need more volunteers, and we need volunteers who are willing to come out, on a regular basis, and help us monitor the condition of water in the watershed. And then we can use the information that's generated and apply it to community water issues as they come up. And here are two prime examples of how you can do that. We've already talked some about the Smith Street tributary. We're suggesting maybe putting up some warning signs to keep kids and pets out of that water. There's PFAS in it too. To test for heavy metals and other pollutants in the sediment, because we don't know what's going on there. And support continuing water quality monitoring of that area, including the cleaner tributary that's coming up from the south, so we can get a better idea of what's moving through that system and when. And the reason that we keep emphasizing that continued testing at different times of the year, another reason is that with raising and lowering the water level in a stream and changing the stream flow, you change the concentration of what's in that water too. So if you have the same amount of a contaminant in a stream, and then there's a drought and the water is a fraction of what it was, you're likely to have a way more concentrated amount in that fraction that can do a lot more damage to drinking water or to aquatic systems than it could when it was diluted by a great rush of water. Conversely, you also have all of the extra things that are washed into the water when the water's high and there's a lot of stormwater runoff. So it's a dynamic system, and we're doing our best to try to monitor it where we can. The library pond is another site that we had not tested before, but because so many things were high in that water, including PFAS, warning signs to keep kids and pets out of that water would also be warranted. And also commissioning a comprehensive study and evaluation of that pond and what's going on in terms of what's in the sediment, what's its drainage, inflow, outflow, and what are some more details about its water quality and what's happening there. And that becomes a real public health issue too. And then consider a monitoring system for harmful algal blooms, including warning signage, but there is a municipal toolkit that's being worked on by Riverkeeper and Eli. Can you fill in on that?
Yeah, so right now we're working with Wallkill River Watershed Alliance. Some of you may know that the Wallkill River is one of the first rivers in New York State to have started having sustained harmful algal blooms, which are the neurotoxin, like they're the algal blooms that can kill your dog and can mess with your head, literally. They have had that several times in the last 5 years, and so we're working with Riverkeeper and the Hudson River Watershed Alliance and the Wallkill River Watershed Alliance, trying to figure out how to first monitor for the harmful algal blooms, and then second, be able to communicate in an efficient and effective way with the community, both the people who have, they've got their kayak rental business, and the farmers that are using the Wallkill River water for irrigation, and just folks who are hiking along the Wallkill or enjoying the Wallkill. It's interesting because the state has long talked about and gathered data around harmful algal blooms happening, but there has never been a development of an actual community-wide means to get the word out. So, and it's so, there are so many steps that the state puts in front of it that it means that the harmful algal bloom is over by the time you know it happened at all. So, so it becomes a community effort, right? So on the Wallkill River, the way that folks know that a harmful algal bloom is happening is because they know the guy who lives right by Sturgeon Pond and sees it when it starts, and then he puts the word out and it slowly makes its way. So anyway, that's what we're trying to develop with the Wallkill River, and it seemed like with the Red Hook Pond, what we found, it might be something that we want to do on a much smaller scale, but it might be, interesting to try to use the tools that we end up developing in this as well.
Eli, could the New York alert system help with that to get the word out? Because I know that's used for a lot of different types of alerts, and it can be kind of specific to certain areas.
It's possible. I'm not familiar with it.
Oh.
But that's possible.
Well, there's a lot that we can do. There's a lot going on, and I'm going to just wrap up at this point and just remind everybody that the health of our waters is a measure of how we live on the land. And to encourage everybody to take a look around, see what's going on in your community, in the water, be aware if something is harming the frogs and the fish and the salamanders, it's probably not good for you either. So it's really good to be aware and be alert about that. And with that, thank you. And that's the quick and dirty nutshell summary.
Will this data be posted publicly now to access?
Yeah, and we've spent so much energy getting this done that that's the next step, is making it easily accessible to everybody. I think maybe putting up a PDF as well that people can access, maybe on our website, I'm not sure. We haven't really.
Could it be on the town website?
It could be on the town website. We haven't. Or the village website. We haven't worked that all through yet. But if somebody wants to take a look at a hard copy, we have a few here. We didn't make a whole lot, like for everybody to take one. We can't do that. But there's a couple copies out if you want to come up and have a look. Otherwise, there's plenty of time for questions or discussion or bringing up other things. Yes?
I just wanted to take the opportunity for the village drinking water. The water comes from wells, and 4 years ago, one of the wells tested positive for a very low level of PFAS. It's a well that's right next to the fire company, and we actually stopped using that well, and we are not using it. So the water from the wells for the drinking water for the village has no measured PFAS in it. Just FYI.
I have to add this. I didn't put this up on the slide because there's so much, and I don't like to bombard people with too many charts and too many words. But I did put together a chart in here of some of the local sites where drinking water has tested positive for PFAS. And I'll just read them down to you really quick because it's interesting. Yeah, it is the Red Hook Water District 1, but that's the town water district. The Devereaux Center, Northern Dutchess Daycare, Unification Theological Seminary, Tivoli Village Water, Funshine Nursery School, Fairway Residential Development, Hannaford Red Hook, Kingston Water District, and then two very high readings so you get a point of comparison for Newburgh, City of Newburgh, and also Hoosick Falls, which are two infamous sites which had off the charts levels of PFAS for special circumstances that we don't deal with here. But it just gives you, and it gives you the readings for all of those places and compares them in the chart, so you can have a look.
Who conducts that testing, the drinking water testing?
What was that?
Who does the drinking water testing? Who's funding that, testing it?
For where?
Those
Who did
sites,
those
is that,
tests?
are those individual
I don't
tests?
know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Eli, the historical data, is there public access to the historical data that you've collected over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. There has been for a very long time.
Okay, where?
Thank you for asking that question because we've got a grant from the Hudson River Foundation, and we are working on making an actual accessible community database to be able to access these data. And what we would do, and what we have been doing, is incorporating these kinds of one-off kind of testing things and putting them together with the monthly sampling that we've been doing almost since 1975. So we're working on that. It should be released in December, but until then, there is a very awkward, and if you're patient, access to our data on the CESH, so cesh.bard.edu website. If you look at the data area, you should be able to access those.
Yeah, and I think if it would be helpful, I think what we'll be talking about, the Saltville Watershed community, is putting together, a plan for access for all of this, so that it'll be easy for people to access all this information and see what they can access where. We haven't really got to
All this
that.
information that's updated is just one test though, from April 6th.
One day, yeah.
One day.
So it's not that much information then.
It's a lot of
We haven't
information, but it really only tells you what happened on April 6th. It's a
Right, so
snapshot, yeah.
there hasn't been any samples since the improvements at the plant and all those things?
So there's monthly sampling that we do at BARD, but we don't do PFAS because We
Right.
don't have the money. We also don't do the
That's not
trihalomethines and the pesticides and herbicides. Those are what's special to this sampling, but we actually do a lot of the chemistry and we do the fecal indicating bacteria. So we do have those samples. We've been sampling at Benner Road since 1975. So
But so like in the last few months, since there's been
Yes.
improvements, have you guys
Yes.
seen
Yes.
correlation to that?
Yes, and that's what we'll be working
So,
on.
and then like in the big picture, if you're looking at all these items, right, like you go up the Sawkill, up Creek, you'd see it spike, plus then, right, and then you could
Yeah.
see some of those charts showed like the Annandale Dam
Yeah.
versus Lower Falls, Lower Cascade,
Yeah.
how it quickly improves or whatever.
Yes.
So that's what you're seeing all that though?
Yes, yes.
And that's interesting that you brought that up, because some of these chemicals, you can show a steady decline toward the mouth or a steady rise toward the mouth of the stream. So, I mean, it's not totally smooth, but for the most part, there's some things accumulate as the water moves along. Others dissipate. So it's like I said before, a very dynamic system.
Karen, do you think with like the PFAS and stuff, that it's sort of a recycling system between the water supply and like wastewater or individuals' wastewater, where it's just contributing and then it's coming back up through the water supply? Or is it coming from other sources beyond that? Can you tell?
It can be coming from a lot of different sources.
Yeah.
I can read you a few of those sources because I didn't want to put that all up either, but I'll just read you a partial list. This is a partial list. Okay, treated apparel and textiles, paper and packaging, for example, food, sandwich, and popcorn paper, circuit boards, ski wax, floor polish, treated leather, firefighter textiles, floor coverings, carpets, laminated plastic, personal care products and cosmetics, sealants and adhesives, coating, paints and varnishes, cleansers for dishes and glasses, upholstery, wood processing and building materials, bicycle lubricant, and firefighting foam. And there are more. So it's coming from us. It's coming from our households, for one thing. And it's just going into our wastewater. And that's why most wastewater treatment plants show some level of PFAS coming out of their wastewater effluent, because it's coming from all of us. And that's why one of the things we can do is be aware of the products that it does come from. It comes from a lot, but usually you have alternatives, and a lot of times manufacturers will let you know if their product is PFAS free. I've recently been buying floor coverings, and I can tell you there are a few that will go to great lengths to tell you it's PFAS free, but most of them don't. But anyway, there's that, and then also PFAS does come from industrial sites, and from, well, like in Newburgh, a lot of it I think came from the firefighting training that was going on there. I'm not sure about what's it called.
Sludge application
Yeah.
is becoming a new
Yes,
big
that was
issue.
an issue in Maine, a pretty serious issue, where the sludge was spread on agricultural fields and got into food. And so this stuff does get into our food.
Hoosick Fall was from DuPont. It was from nonstick cookware.
Yeah.
Totally nonstick cookware.
Yeah, and and some of it, these chemicals are different. I described the 4 of them that we did find, and they're a little bit different in terms of how they're taken up, whether they get into the air, whether they travel via water or get into the soil. They're all a little bit different that way, and they're all a little bit different in their effects, but they all have negative effects on people and on other animals as well. Yeah?
I just want to thank you all for all the work that you're doing on this and the water testing and the results. I have to scoop it. I did want to mention that we have a grant, as you probably know, for brining equipment, and we'll be hopefully this winter brining our roads. And
Oh,
so
good.
we'll be interested in what your sampling results are next
Oh, yeah.
spring
Absolutely.
to see
Is that-
the improvement.
Is that the sand mixture or just lower salt content then?
No, so you'll be pre-treating the roadways, which is, we have found, at least in the last few years, of course, now that I say this, I'll be wrong for next winter, but there have been a lot of storms where it's been just, a small amount of precipitation,
Right.
maybe icy roads. And so you can benefit by pre-treating the roads and, having a minor storm, and then you're not out there throwing lots of salt wondering, how much you may get.
And that's better
Storm.
for the vegetation and stuff then?
Well,
Doing that method?
supposedly it is. I'm not the expert, but that's what the people who are knowledgeable about this
And we
topic
don't do
say.
full sand just because it's not safe enough?
It's generally 50/50 because the village
We do
uses
split
the
that.
same.
Right, okay.
And brining allows you to use a lot less
A
salt.
lot
That's
less.
it's still salt, but
That's yeah.
it's diluted into water and it gets sprayed onto the road. And so you don't need the extra
Yeah,
stuff
cool.
for a while. So
And the town
in
of
theory,
Rhinebeck-
it's a lot less salt.
Sorry to interrupt. Town of Rhinebeck has been doing this now for a few years, and they've had some success from a maintenance and
Yeah.
operations and cost standpoint.
That's good.
Obviously, environmentally is what we're interested in.
And that's really important that you're doing that, because I know in some places, like in Orange County, there have been wells, private wells that have had to be closed down because of salt. Once salt gets in your well, your water supply is pretty much.
Robert, what about the shared roads like Mylan? We live on the border, so our road is actually cleared by Mylan. There's any commitment from them to do the brining?
I don't know. All I will say is sometimes, good things spread, right? Henry, you know this. You got all your neighbors to help out with so many events, the road cleaning and all. So, just like we are following the example of Rhinebeck in this particular case, hopefully Mylan and Glenn Butler and those guys there do a terrific job.
Robert, do you know if the state is doing any brining?
They historically have, I can't speak to what they'll be doing this
Just
winter.
given our major roads that go through our.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Historically, they have pre-treated a lot. I don't know what they're,
Zoe?
On the pesticides and repeated testing, is there any commitment for funding for testing in late summer, early fall after pesticide applications? And particularly like the library pond, I'm very curious about whether or not there's any plans to do more testing.
Yeah, we don't have that together yet, but
Okay.
the Watershed, I know the Watershed community as a group is kind of reforming, probably reforming in a way that enables us to do a lot more water quality sampling, as opposed to the different kinds of projects or the array of projects that we've done in the past. It'll be more of our focus, I think, in the future. And we will rely on community volunteers for a large part to help us do that. But we don't have a plan in place yet. And just as a word about the Sawkill Watershed community, we're in the process of putting together a fiscal sponsorship so that we can get our own grant funding. We can't do that yet without that, until we have that piece in place. So it's all in the works. We're trying to move forward as quick as we can, but whatever ideas people have or whatever people want to contribute to our effort, that's great and it's very welcome.
In the big picture, just I get a sense the improvements that have been done, we're seeing things improving, right? Since the last, whatever it was, 3-4 months ago when the meetings were beginning, right?
Downstream of the waste treatment plant?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like from at the bar site, in general, you
The
see
fecal indicating bacteria are decreasing. Yeah.
Because people are swimming all the time at the waterfalls.
Oh, down there. So what we also saw from this sampling is that whatever is happening in a concentrated fashion on Smith Street and going into Benner Road is being diluted out completely by the time it gets to Bart.
And that test site you've been doing more often.
Yeah,
since
and
April
also the really interesting thing is Bart has always gotten our drinking water from the Sawkill. So there is a lot of testing that happens when the source water is taken up, which is right towards the end of the Sawkill, but right before our waste treatment plant.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing. But so we have a very long record there of whether or not there are these kinds of things, and they do PFAS testing very infrequently because again it's really expensive. But they are testing for certain things, and those have not rung alarm bells. So it means that what's happening at the wastewater treatment plant is it's something that is very localized. It means it's still important to address. It also means that, so when you think about a waterway, it's the same as the air, it's additive, right? And so if you've got you've got something major going into the waterway, there might be enough water to dilute it before you get to the end. But if you keep adding and you get other spots that are adding, and then you have a drought, who knows if it's going to show up down there, right? So this is the kind of thing where you need to deal with the local problems, absolutely, but they're not necessarily causing problems downstream.
Well, and we did also, I think Zoe asked you about swimming after rain events, and the advisement was do not go in any waterways.
I could see that.
48 hours after.
I could see that after Monday's storm it's still pretty murky out in there.
It mixes things up.
I paddleboard on it every day. I live on the corner 9G in Kelly.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm on the Sawkill where it crosses 9G. And so I'm in the water every day. Not in it necessarily, but at least paddleboarding or something. And yeah, this particular rainstorm really was noticeably murky, just like heat
Everywhere.
You know, I've looked other places too. Like I was swimming at Big Deep too, and I was like, it was just the same. So I was like, okay, cool. It's not just. It's not just this one.
Well, I just think that some of the recommendations about what to do. There's really expensive things like putting in filtration systems. Really low-hanging fruit is public education, and really low-hanging fruit is signage. You're not actively educating people. So on our high, also particularly by the rec park, the swimming hole, by the pass-through where people come through the estates across this tributary, I would love to see some signage, especially about don't swim there during the rain, because that is such a low-cost way to protect public health, and that would be great.
If I can just add, at the wastewater treatment plant, we're actually testing at the discharge. We've been testing weekly. And fecal coliform since about mid-April has been below 10. And there are other items that we're testing. And for the month of June, it's all in full compliance with what we're required. So specifically out of the wastewater treatment plant, there's been an enormous turnaround from early April to today. So.
We've talked a lot about that site, and I just want to add, because the focus is so much on the wastewater treatment plant and the effluent, that site, there's more going on in that area than just the wastewater treatment plant, because it has such a long history of industrial pollution, and we don't know the fate of some of those chemicals. We don't know if they're in the sediment, if they've settled out so that they can be washed by stormwater back into our water systems. And that's one reason why it's really important to figure out how we can initiate some sediment testing as well as water testing. Because it's not just the treatment plant. There's more going on at that site that could have potential to generate problems, but we don't know really what that is yet. Yeah.
I was just going to ask, what are the, I'm sure you're studying this, but you didn't mention it here, and maybe because it's not a problem, but temperature levels, oxygen levels, those kinds of things, watershed.
Those are measured on a monthly basis by the BART Community Sciences Lab. And we have that data now since 2014.
It's warming.
Yeah, for many of the sites that we've...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You might want to deploy continuous sensors maybe in a few key locations.
Yeah, so one of the things, so the way that we've been operating is we're continuing what got started in 1975. Interestingly, in 1975, it was a BARD chemist and students who partnered with community, and it was largely because of what was happening where the wastewater treatment plant is now, because it was a very bad actor who was doing all sorts of things, and everyone was upset, and so they needed to figure out how do we compare this to other sites, what's actually happening, So we have temperature data from them. We also have, so we've been trying to do the same kinds of analyses that were done back then, and so that we can actually have, I think our Sawkill Watershed has the most intact historical sampling history, and the data that we have are really unique. No one has data like we have. That's why we're trying to develop the database. What it does is it allows us to look at what was it like in 1975 in terms of temperature, and what was it like now. It's totally warming, there's no question, but we knew climate change was happening.
Right.
So the other question is, as a community, we know that certain things are happening. What are the questions that we need answered to be able to deal with the fact that climate is changing, right? So like, so is it that we want to know how temperature is changing on a more like a high resolution, like every minute as opposed to every month? Or is it that we want to invest in looking at PFAS levels? Or is it that we want to invest, as a community, we can start asking questions that then can direct Saukett Watershed community and getting the funding for it.
Right. And then
Yeah.
the thermal inputs from, it's not just air, temperature, but also stormwater.
Right.
Hot stormwater runoff in the summer, because that's usually when streams will exceed the
Yes.
standards.
Yes.
And I'm not really sure, I'm kind of new to the area, but, it seems that you have a somewhat, like trout production streams, and, you want to try to keep track of the temperature of your streams, especially as development increases in the watershed. You just get more and more runoff from impervious surfaces.
Sure, yeah. There's, we've got the really rich context, and then there's the
Yeah.
questions of the community we want to ask and get in there and find out.
Just one more thing real quick. So say your data is really important for driving any kind of solutions, because you often have to show that something's happening in order for people to want to, spend money to fix it or change behaviors. But I was gonna just ask if you've considered pulling it together into a watershed restoration and protection plan for the Sauk Hill as sort of an end goal, using the EPA points. And a lot of it deals with stormwater, but there's obviously other things that are going on besides stormwater runoff, which is climate change related too. But it would give a roadmap for what the municipality wants to see happen, as far as like green infrastructure and even zoning, or different you can put everything in there basically, land preservation. But I was just going to recommend that as something. I'm really interested in what you're all doing, and it's so important, and I'm really impressed with how many parameters you're actually testing. Hopefully DEC is getting, you're sharing the data with them. Since you spend so much money and you are testing so many things like PFAS, I don't know if they're able to even do that level of testing, so.
Probably not.
Why don't you tell folks where
Yeah.
you're from? Why don't you tell folks where you're from?
Oh, I'm with Hudsonia.
Hudsonia.
Yeah.
Okay.
But before that, my previous career, I was with the Watershed Association, Meriden and Watershed, New Jersey.
As a group, we've been evolving. We're totally, volunteer. And right now, we are looking to kind of reorganize and re-up our efforts in water quality testing. That takes so much effort, and putting something like this project together took so much effort that we don't have additional effort to come up with a plan. We're too busy collecting the information, so it's it gets to be a trade-off at some point.
Right.
But
I don't think you should do it all yourself
No.
either, because it's a heavy lift.
But if we could get to the point where we get some funding and bring in some other people, yes, there's all kinds of things that we'd be able to do.
I think there were some elements in the comprehensive plan touching on it very lightly, not to the in-depth depth that you're
Yeah.
probably talking like, but maybe the comprehensive plan that's under review right now, perhaps there's an opportunity to bridge that in there, because it seems like that would be a good place for it, and then you'd have town support, which has a lot more resources,
It's also the-
because I know Hudsonia is doing the inventory, right, or no?
We're waiting on the RFP to come out.
Well,
Oh, okay. But it might
I will
be
say,
waiting for
if anyone here is interested in pursuing this with us, not the planning part, but the water quality testing that we're trying to organize and put together, we are very open. You're welcome to join us. Let Henry know before you leave, and we're happy to get back in touch with you. But we're always welcoming people to come and help us do this work, because there's a lot of work, and there's getting to be more work, it seems, and the more we find out. Yeah.
Okay, comment and a question. Comment is the Sauk Hill Tributary Coalition, which is related to the wastewater treatment plant. We have a quote for pretty comprehensive sediment testing from PBE. It's about $1,500. They would come in, they would test from a bunch of different sites, and it's focused on the heavy metals and the residuals that were left over from the partial cleanup. So if there is any funding from the village or town by Robert that could do the sediment testing on site, I think as a follow-up to this, that would be fantastic. I know recently I learned that there's 4 properties on Garden Street that abutted that had arsenic levels over the threshold that were asked to replace their soil. I can't get in contact with any of the homeowners for that, so I don't know if they ever did that. There's just so much potential contamination in there. I think all of us as a community who live around this area would like to get that answered. And water testing, like what Eli's lab can do, has limitations as far as looking at the sediment, and so would love to prioritize sediment testing in there. And we have a quote, we can give it to you, connect you with the people.
You know my email?
I do, I will send it to you, but it was fun. And okay, the other question I had, will we have a PDF of this to share out with the coalition on Friday and the update? Do you think it'll be ready for Friday? Okay, cool.
So what I wanted to point out that, so if you want to look at the online version, some of you have the link.
Yeah.
I made it so that if you have the link, you can share it with everyone and they can look at it.
Great.
But also the link is here if folks want it. It's
not
easy, like it's not, you can take a picture of it maybe. I don't know how you do this.
Just wanted, no, we'll share out the link. I just wanted to confirm that it's in a good place to share out for Friday.
Yeah, and I think we're going to do a PDF share too.
Okay, and I'll note in that, that we'll follow up probably by the end of the summer realistically with our capacity, but on the additional data for the follow-up testing. The question I had was the library pond. It's a site I don't know much about, and it showed up with quite a few of the tests. So what is the context of that site for why it would have high PFAS levels and other things?
It has a long history.
So this is not something I want to open.
That I don't even know all of it, but everybody I asked just says, oh my gosh, it's got a long history. So, at some point, we're going to need to jump into that.
It doesn't drain, so anything that washes into it stays there.
Okay, that seems really problematic for
And
a
it
lot of
was
things.
drained in the 50s because like the supervisor at the time lived on it and wanted it cleared out. So it was completely emptied at one time, but then it filled back in.
This has to do with that culvert under the road,
Yes.
the block thing? Okay, got it.
And
It used to fit, it's basically at the water table.
Yeah.
So when the water table goes up, this is when it starts to get higher. And back in the late 1800s, it also would get high, and there was a drainage system that went out through, across what is now Garden Street. So it's got a very long history.
So this is an example of
It's also
still
on private property as well.
Yeah, this is an example of still water that's trapped, that's showing us a historical legacy of everything.
Well, and if it's
doesn't get out.
interfacing with the water table, that's another problem
groundwater
too.
that's happening.
Because stuff can get into the groundwater and into people's wells.
Yeah, there's been some flooding issues too.
Yes, I'm aware of that. In a situation where it's private property, how are those, like, if you look at other case studies and stuff, how is that handled? Like, if the private owners have to come up, because you suggested a comprehensive, study to do it. Who is responsible for that?
I think the fact that the library has a waterfront is kind of the way I think that we can get anything done, honestly.
So the
because the
library
is right
they don't
on
own
it.
any of the ponds?
So no, but the waterfront is affecting the Red Hook Library. Kids are there; they are playing outside. They're like things that that I think can push things in a different way. I think that the PFAS that's there is probably a combination of legacy, and there's going to be some leaky septic tanks around. That's where the PFAS is coming from. PFAS isn't coming from industrial around here. It's coming from us. So somehow us is getting into that pond, and so
that could be through the water table. That could just be going down, across, and then welling up. And as the level goes up and down.
Do septic systems that are not leaking but go through their normal distro and leach field systems, are those getting PFAS out, or why is it that a leaky septic system is so much worse than a normal system if there's nothing removing PFAS at all?
Because it should be. So this is not actually a fix, but basically what we're doing when we put when our septic tanks are going out to their leach fields, the PFAS or whatever's in there is binding to the soil.
Okay.
So the water that takes off from there is cleaner. But it just means our leach fields, I don't even want to get into that. Just want to start like sampling their leach fields, you're going to see a lot.
So in a situation like with the wastewater treatment plant, where it's going into a running stream, is this one where having holding cells or holding ponds for water where it has a longer chance to settle into the sediment? Is that a way of filtering, or do you really need to implement? I mean, we talked yesterday, I think it was at the wastewater treatment plant update, and Robert Flores said that, you know, you basically needed a whole new plant in order to remove PFAS. Are there things that can be done that might be already being done as part of a remediation strategy to help fix the PFAS in place rather than sending it through the whole waterway?
It's developing. There's a lot of new technology that's being developed also in other parts of the world.
Okay.
A lot of experimentation that's going on, and some of the stuff that I read, there are places that have successfully removed. There are
Denmark
methods.
seems like a very interesting place.
There are methods in
So many ways.
you know, that can remove almost 100% of the PFAS. Of course, then you have to figure out where you're going to put it, but you can get it out of your drinking water, and I think that those systems are not going to be so horribly prohibitive. I even read about systems that are in-home, where you can put them on your in-home water filter and filter out PFAS. So that takes more investigating, but I think there are a lot of possibilities out there.
So the answer we got yesterday might have been a legacy answer reflecting historical experiences of septic people with it, and not actually.
Or its current experience. Again, there's a lot that's going on right now.
Yeah.
And a lot of places aren't even testing for what PFAS is there. And so this really is a whole new conversation, as I understand it. So there are obviously some wastewater treatment plants that are testing for PFAS. There are a lot that aren't.
Yeah.
And so there are some that have a filtration system after. And obviously, if you're building that, it's well ahead. So if you mean by that, it's what was thought to be done a couple years ago.
So it could be that in the event that you're building a whole new plant. So if we were to expand and not put the expansion right where it is, and we had to build a new plant, for example, that could be done in a way that is potentially the PFAS filtration is built into the design of the new plant in a way that's more cost effective than.
Yes.
Just like,
yes, but it requires creativity.
Okay.
It requires a letting go of how it's always been done.
Yeah.
It will also be expensive because of all those things.
Okay.
So, but I think the interesting thing to me as a scientist and as someone who's paying attention to these emerging contaminants in our water, both in our wastewater and our drinking water, is that there are, even before we got worried and upset about PFAS, we were before that really worried about all the pharmaceuticals, the Prozacs, everything that's coming through our body that's ending up in the water. That's still there. It's like acid rain. It's still happening. It's just we're not thinking about it anymore.
Yeah.
But the fix to that has always been to have the water settle for longer, to let the bacteria and the other things process that water for longer. And then when the water eventually leaves, it has far less of those. And so that fix is about land and property. It's not about not being able to do it. It's about landscaping. It's like a very serious landscaping question, and also is about it's already going into a wetland. So I think there's opportunity. It's worth exploring. I don't know if it's possible at all, but I think it's worth exploring because we already have a wetland that it's pouring into.
Yeah.
So you could possibly work with that wetland to help it do its job better before it comes down. But it's really important to keep in mind that all these things are accumulating them in the sediments that you're holding the pond in. So then if you have a failure and you have a massive extreme weather event, it's going to all come out anyway.
So the example of the library pond, we could build our own library pond essentially.
Yeah.
And I know that the Smith Street site, which you're all talking about, but it applies to everything, is only 10 feet above the aquifer. So having things held in the sediment there, very porous sediment, is not necessarily.
I know what you want to do.
But Karen, we'll think about all this as we do the grant applications for remediation.
Kat, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say that in Denmark, that I've been kind of looking as sort of a best practice area because they seem to have figured this out, and they have people all over the world kind of coming to see what they do. Their recommendation is to have decentralized units for smaller municipalities, which is kind of what we're we're hoping to kind of move towards. And that in that way, I don't know if it would also help with the PFAS issue.
It will.
But yeah, it does seem like it might help mitigate a lot of this stuff rather than just like throwing it all in one thing and watching it go away. It also helps with water conservation and reuse,
Yes.
which is also kind of a big concern here with everything else, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And they also do constructed wetlands, so I don't know if there's an opportunity with that pond perhaps to maybe do some of that too, to help kind of mitigate some of that, but that seems like that could be cost effective.
You would have to first do a study of the existing system and see, what kinds of wetlands there are, what's growing there, what the soil is like, how it's working, and how it isn't working, and kind of, do that characterization. And then when you have that information, you could begin to figure out how to make it better, how to enhance it. But any wetland does have an upper limit. I mean, you can't load it with stuff. It will be overwhelmed and won't be able to process enough. So it's a balance, and it takes doing that study first to see what you've got and how it works.
So back, you guys were mentioning the algal blooms that have been increasing. What are things we can look out for that?
Well, the Saukville hasn't had any that I'm aware of
Okay.
itself. The main stem hasn't had harmful algal bloom yet. The pond is certainly probably having them all the time, honestly, but we're not even checking.
But just regular algae along the banks?
So there's no, it would,
What's
for
the
these
difference?
harmful algal blooms, they show up as bright green.
Like a neon?
Yeah, a little bit neon, yeah. But it's not even that simple. You have to like grab the organisms and really take a look at them to know exactly what the blooms are. So the way that so the community science approach, I think, would be just being able to pay attention to what's happening to the water and looking at what color it is. And when it turns a weird color that we have never seen before, we go and check it, right? I mean, it's that basic, I think, in terms of monitoring for algal blooms.
Is your lab able to do testing for that?
We can test for, we can take a look at the morphology of the organisms that are in there, but we wouldn't be able to, have the DEC level analysis that shows the neurotoxins or parts of it.
Okay. Have you ever tested the Mill Pond, the Mill Road Pond?
I was thinking about that. That is also something that we might.
Brenda's water, yes, I might bring you a sample.
There are more sites. There are definitely more sites.
Is there any research on how long after a known bloom the water is then safe to swim in or let pets in?
Well, there's plenty of there's plenty of science around that. It all depends on the meteorology, basically. So it's kind of like a bad air quality day. If it rains, it all resets. So you don't have any bad air anymore, right? It cleans it up. Same is true of these algal blooms. If it rains, it's going to stir the whole bloom up. It's going to break it apart. Who knows what's going to happen next, right? But yeah, so I think the key is making sure you're at the point where the bloom has used up all the nutrients it can and now it's dying off. So it can't keep going, right? But the presence of neurotoxins, that's a whole other question.
Can any of that stuff become airborne?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Has anyone tried using the New York DEC suspicious algal bloom reporting form to see if they can test?
Yeah, and as I said,
You know, that was a thing, oh goodness. Okay, New York DEC.
but as I said though, usually that warning comes up after.
Right, but I mean, if you wanted to test to see if it's the pond has it, get them to come out because they have
We
to
could try.
I also use
See how it
that
works.
website as a general indicator of conditions, because like Wilcox County Park in Milan has blooms all the time. And so if there's a bloom going on there, or there was recently, like chances are probably decent that the library pond might be, or mill pond might be.
Yeah.
Oh, and so that website is alerting it because they're monitoring known sites or something?
Yeah, I think what you're getting at is that there's a pretty big time lag there from when they get a report to when it actually goes up on the website. But you see all of the blooms for the whole year. So there's already been a bloom at Wilcox this year. There's been a bloom at Mirror Lake by the Taconic. That one was active the last time I checked the site. So it's an indicator that conditions are good, right? And so the other places that are likely here.
Yeah. Totally. No, that's totally true.
Well, we can hang around and continue, but what I'm going to formally say, we're done, thank you for coming. There's always more conversation, there's always more work to do, so thank you.
Thank you.